This is R2D Tech, and today we're going to be having a closer look at the Huawei P40 Pro Plus, so stay tuned. Firstly, if you're wondering whether you can get your hands on this phone now, the answer is not yet. But from what Huawei have said, it seems it will be released in June. If the name confuses you slightly, this phone is the very top spec that you can buy at the moment from Huawei. It's even more specced out than the P40 Pro, hence the Plus. With that extra Plus added onto the Pro, of course the price is also significantly higher. While the P40 Pro was around £1,000, this one is going to be around £1,400, which is a huge increase in price. It's probably worth noting that you could buy the new MacBook Air from Apple with upgrades for cheaper than this phone, which is pretty crazy. So let's see if the price is actually justified. Starting with the display, this is actually quite similar to the P40 Pro. You've got your 90Hz refresh rate, which is very nice to see, and you'll see the difference in responsiveness when you're actually using the device. Of course, the panel is OLED, which will give you more vibrant content and more real blacks. The resolution of the panel is also the same, so it's not quite 1440p, it's 1200p. But once again, I feel it's important to note that your eye won't really be able to tell the difference between these resolutions. So even if the panel was 1440p, you probably wouldn't notice the difference between that and this panel. That's definitely not a reason to not buy this phone. One thing that is different between this and the standard Pro is actually the material on the back. The standard Pro actually has glass on the back like most phones this year, whereas this phone, the Pro Plus, comes with a ceramic back, and that's supposedly engineered with some new nanomaterial. With that new back, you get different color options. So while with the Pro you got that really cool grey satin finish, with the Pro Plus you'll have to choose between white or black, and both are glossy. Personally, I really like the look of the black on this phone and the white. They're very, very reflective, which is cool to look at, but of course you have to keep the phone very clean. This finish will definitely pick up fingerprints more than that matte satin grey finish on the Pro. But that's not to say that I don't like it, and you can always put a skin on if this bothers you. In addition, of course, you have that same 40-watt charging and also 40-watt wireless charging, which is absolutely insane, and the reverse wireless charging that you've come to expect with Huawei devices. All of these charging specs are absolutely amazing, and you'll be able to charge your phone super quick. According to Huawei, a full charge within 58 minutes. It's mainly that wireless charging at 40 watts that's most impressive though. And if you're wondering where you can get a 40-watt wireless charger, Huawei actually do sell this. In terms of audio consumption, you don't get that 3.5mm headphone jack, which is slightly disappointing, but then again it's 2020 and most people have Bluetooth earphones nowadays. That's the trend at the moment and we've just got to accept it. Software wise, it's going to be EMUI 10.1 and that will be over Android 10. So again, you have that Huawei skin situation going on, which some people will like. I personally think it's quite a nice software, whereas other people might disagree. I'd love to find out whether some of you guys actually like it or not, so let me know down below. Of course, again, it's very important to mention with Huawei devices in general. At the moment, you won't really be getting Google services with your Huawei device, and updates will be very scarce. So personally, I find this to be a slight deal breaker because I rely on Google services on a daily basis, as I said in the P40 Pro video. But if you can see yourself living without Google services, which is a pretty big deal in my opinion, then this phone will still be fine for you. Just to clear things up even more, that means living without Google Maps, YouTube, Google Play, lots of apps which are on the Google Play Store, so it's definitely something to consider. The display on this phone is 6.58 inches, which is a very large display, but it's nothing ridiculous like the Galaxy Ultra. So if you're someone that does like a larger display, this will be a great phone for you. Again, it has the whole scenario where the display does wrap around the edge quite significantly. In my opinion, this is a bit of a gimmick and I don't really like it, but I can see how some people might find it quite cool and futuristic. Of course, the main upgrade with this phone over the P40 Pro is actually the camera unit. Now, at first glance, the camera unit looks very similar. It's the same shape and a very similar, if not the same size. But of course, being the Pro Plus, this has a very upgraded camera system. The primary lens is a 50 megapixel wide lens, which is absolutely amazing. You'll be able to get great detail with this for sure. You then have an 8 megapixel periscope lens, which will give you up to 10 times optical zoom. This is much better than what the Galaxy Ultra will offer you. Now the difference is the Galaxy Ultra only has a 4 times optical zoom lens, but then it has a very high resolution so it can crop into that and give a similar effect. But definitely the actual optical zoom is more refined than this. You'll see this mainly when it comes to video. So when you film video on the Galaxy Ultra, you actually can't crop in like this. So when you zoom during video on the Galaxy, it will be completely digital past the 4 times point. Whereas with this phone, you'll be able to zoom up to 10 times on the video optically, and that will end up giving you a much sharper image when it comes to video. You then have a separate 8 megapixel 3 times optical zoom lens, and this is with a slightly different aperture, so you have slightly more variety. And then of course you have the very useful 40 megapixel ultra wide lens, along with a 3D time of flight sensor. I've mentioned it before and I'll mention it again, the ultra wide is a very useful lens, and being 40 megapixels you'll be able to get great sharp images with this one. So there you have it, that's 4 camera lenses and 1 time of flight lens with this phone, which is I think one of the largest number of sensors I've seen on a phone. And it will provide you with many different perspectives when taking a photo, and with the megapixel counts and the ability to zoom up to 10 times optically, you'll be able to get very cool sharp video and photo. Now software processing again might not be as good on this phone as with the Galaxy or an iPhone for example. So on that front the final image might not look as good to you, but that's always up to personal preference. And another thing to mention is the stabilization might not be as good on this phone as with the Galaxy Ultra, mainly because the Galaxy Ultra now has that super steady mode. In terms of resolution with video, you can go up to 4K 60 FPS. Now that's definitely adequate, and most people don't even have a most people don't even have a 4K display. For example, I don't have a 4K display, and therefore shooting video in 1080p most of the time is perfectly fine. In fact, this video that you're watching right now is shot in 1080p. So the fact that it does film in 4K 60 is great, and I wouldn't think about the 8K which the Galaxy Ultra can film in that much, because at the moment, to be honest, it's a bit of a gimmick. With the front cameras, you've got that same pill-shaped cutout camera like you did on the P40 Pro. Now, this is slightly large, but it's definitely useful because they give you an ultra-wide lens and a standard wide lens. As I said in the other video, when you're taking selfies, having that ultra wide is very useful because often it's hard to fit all the subjects into the photo. And the reason that this specific cutout is slightly larger than we've seen on other phones is that they have an infrared face unlock sensor, so it's more secure than a standard camera face unlock like on the OnePlus devices. Speakers will be perfectly adequate, nothing amazing. You've got your bottom firing speaker and some good software tuning. Of course, you won't be blown away by the sound, but it's definitely good enough for a smartphone. Like on the P40 Pro, this has the Kirin 990 chipset, which is 5G enabled. So if you live in an area with good 5G infrastructure, then this might be a feature which benefits you quite well. Mainly much faster connectivity, but to be honest, at the moment the infrastructure isn't there in most places, so I wouldn't buy this phone just for that feature. So when it comes to RAM and storage, this phone comes with 8GB of RAM and up to 512GB of storage. And to add to this, there is expandable storage, so you can extend the storage by up to 256GB. This is actually very good for a smartphone, and of course, not having Google Photos because of the lack of Google services, you probably will actually need the storage on this phone. Most of the time when I review a smartphone, I say that with the cloud services available nowadays, storage isn't such a big deal, but definitely this time it will be. Overall, I think it's safe to say that the hardware on this phone is very, very impressive. Now the software is where things get slightly interesting with this phone. Don't get me wrong, the actual software is very nice in my opinion. It's not stock Android, so if that's what you're looking for, then you won't want this phone. But it is a very usable and very fluid software with some cool animations. It's just that lack of Google services that really puts me off, and will probably put lots of people off. As I said in the other video, I personally couldn't live without the Google services, But if you disagree with me, then please let me know in the comments section. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this issue. £1,400 is a lot of money, whatever the hardware and software experience. The ability to zoom on video with less quality loss than the Galaxy Ultra is what really intrigues me on this phone, because I love to film video with my smartphone. But I definitely couldn't live without Google services, so I do think, considering the lack of Google services, the price point is slightly steep. For this reason, I personally can't recommend this phone.
Oh no, he didn't.
But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to personal preference. If you can see yourself living without any of those Google services and applications, then the hardware on this phone is very impressive. And in that case, you might want to consider buying it. But for the vast majority of users, this won't really be the case, because most people do rely on those services very heavily. I hope we covered everything you might want to know about this phone. If you do have any more questions, then be sure to let us know in the comment section below. Other than that, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, then hit that thumbs up button. And otherwise, if you loved it, hit that subscribe button and notification bell below.